The child's hand trembled as she pointed through the shelter window, her voice barely a whisper against the barking chaos inside. Officer Ethan Brown stood frozen, his weathered face draining of color as his eyes locked onto the scarred German shepherd in the corner cage. The dog sat rigid, one ear missing, a constellation of old wounds mapping its body like a terrible story written in flesh. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He knew this dog. But how could that be possible? The day had started like any other Saturday in Pine Ridge, a small town where everyone knew everyone, and secrets rarely stayed buried for long. Ethan Brown had been a police officer for 23 years, his body carrying the weight of 2 decades of service like stones in his pockets. His daughter, Cora, had turned 7 that week, Fawaitor, and he had promised her something special, a trip to the animal shelter to find a companion, something to fill the silence that had haunted their home since her mother's passing 3 years ago. Cora was a quiet child, small for her age, with dark hair that fell in waves around a face too serious for 7 years. She moved through the world like a shadow, observing more than she spoke, feeling more than she showed. The other children at school called her strange. The teachers whispered trauma in hushed voices, and Ethan watched helplessly as his daughter built walls around herself that he could not scale. The shelter sat on the edge of town, a low brick building that smelled of disinfectant and desperation. Eva ran the place, a woman whose heart was too big for the small budget the county provided. She had called Ethan that morning, her voice carrying an urgency that made his cop instincts prickle. "Ethan, I need you to come by today," she had said. "Before you bring Cora. There's something you need to see." But Cora had been awake early, dressed, and waiting by the door with a patience that broke his heart, and he could not bring himself to make her wait another day. So he had ignored Ava's call, ignored the warning bells in his mind, and driven his daughter to meet her future. The shelter's waiting room buzzed with the sounds of animals and hope. Dogs barked from the kennels beyond, cats meowed from their enclosures, and the air thrummed with the possibility of new beginnings. Cora stood close to Ethan, her hand gripping his with a strength that surprised him. She had always been like this, quiet on the surface, but underneath, currents ran deep and dark. Ava emerged from the back, her face tightening when she saw them together. She shot Ethan a look that said they needed to talk, but Cora was already pulling him toward the kennel area, and the moment passed like smoke through fingers. The kennel corridor stretched before them, lined with cages on both sides. Dogs of every size and shape pressed against the bars, some barking, some whining, some sitting in defeated silence. Cora walked slowly, studying each one with an intensity that seemed beyond her years. She passed the excited puppies, the friendly mutts wagging their tails, the older dogs with graying muzzles who had given up on being chosen. Then she stopped. The German shepherd sat in the corner cage, apart from the others. It was not a large dog, despite its breed, and its body bore the marks of a hard life. One ear was missing, torn away, leaving only a ragged stump. Scars crisscrossed its muzzle and legs, some old and silvered, some newer and still pink. But it was the eyes that struck Ethan first, intelligent, wary, and carrying a weight that seemed almost human. "Can I buy that dog, Daddy?" Cora's voice was soft, almost reverent. Ethan felt his world tilt sideways. The dog's eyes met his, and in that moment, recognition slammed into him like a fist to the gut. The scar pattern on the left shoulder, 3 parallel lines, the missing ear, the way it held its head, slightly tilted, always watching. This was Ranger. But Ranger had died 4 years ago. Ethan had been there. He had held the dog as it bled out in his arms, had felt the life leave its body after the warehouse raid went wrong. He had buried Ranger himself. had mourned the partner who had saved his life more times than he could count. He had the scars to prove it, the bullet wound in his shoulder, where Ranger had pushed him out of the way, the knife scar on his leg where the dog had taken down an armed suspect. Yet here sat a dog that could have been Ranger's twin, down to the specific pattern of scars that Ethan had memorized during long nights on patrol. Eva appeared at his elbow, her voice low and urgent. "Ethan, I tried to warn you. The dog came in 3 days ago. No tags, no chip. Won't let anyone touch it. But there's something you need to know." "What's its name?" Cora asked, her eyes never leaving the dog. Ava hesitated, glancing at Ethan. "The kennel workers have been calling it Phantom. It appeared out of nowhere during that storm on Tuesday. Just showed up at our back door, half starved and covered in mud. We think it's been living wild for a while." Ethan's mind raced. The timeline was wrong. The scars were right. The eyes held too much knowledge, too much pain, too much that reminded him of his old partner. He stepped closer to the cage, and the dog's attention sharpened, focusing on him with an intensity that made his skin prickle. "Cora, maybe we should look at some of the other. This one." Cora's voice carried a finality that he recognized. She had made up her mind, and once Cora decided something, moving her was like trying to redirect a river with bare hands. But Ethan could not shake the feeling that bringing this dog home would be a mistake. Yet what reason could he give? That it looked like his dead canine partner? That it scared him in ways he could not explain? That looking into its eyes made him feel like he was staring at a ghost? However, Ethan did not know that this decision would unravel a truth that had been buried for 4 years, and the revelation would shake the foundations of everything he believed about that terrible night. They brought Phantom home on a Saturday afternoon, the dog sitting rigid in the back of Ethan's truck, its eyes never leaving the rearview mirror where it could watch him. Cora sat beside it, her small hand resting near, but not touching the scarred fur, talking in a voice so soft Ethan could barely hear her over the engine. The house stood on Maple Street, a modest 2-story, with a fenced yard that had seen better days. Ethan had let things slide since Yasmin died. The grass grew too long, the paint peeled in places, the gutters needed cleaning. He worked too much, slept too little, and spent his time between cases and being a father, with nothing left over for maintenance. Phantom moved through the house like a soldier sweeping for threats. It checked every room, every corner, every window. Its movements were efficient, practiced, nothing like a stray that had been living wild. Ethan watched from the kitchen doorway as the dog completed its inspection and finally settled in the living room, positioning itself where it could see both the front door and the hallway to the bedrooms. "It's protecting us," Cora said, appearing at his side. She had a way of moving silently, of materializing like her namesake. "Maybe." Ethan did not mention that the dog's behavior reminded him exactly of how Ranger used to clear a building during drug raids. That first night, Phantom refused to eat. It drank water sparingly and stayed in its chosen spot in the living room, watching, waiting. Cora brought it toys, which it ignored. She offered treats, which went untouched. But she kept trying, kept talking to the dog in that quiet voice, kept being present without demanding anything in return. Ethan lay awake in his bedroom, staring at the ceiling, his mind churning through memories he had tried to bury. The warehouse raid had been a disaster from the start. Bad intelligence, wrong entry point, suspects who were more heavily armed than anyone had anticipated. Ranger had taken point, as always, leading Ethan through the dark corridors, while the rest of the team secured the perimeter. Then the explosion, the gunfire, the chaos. Ethan had been separated from his partner in the smoke and confusion. When he found Ranger again, the dog had been lying in a pool of blood, multiple gunshot wounds, barely breathing. Ethan had called for medical, But it had been too late. He had held Ranger as the light faded from those intelligent eyes, had whispered apologies and thanks, had promised to never forget. The department had given Ranger a hero's funeral, full honors, flag-draped coffin, 21-gun salute. Ethan had kept the flag, folded tight in its triangle, in his closet. He had scattered Ranger's ashes in the mountains, where they used to hike on days off. So how was a dog that looked exactly like Ranger, down to specific scars, now sleeping in his living room? The house settled into silence around him, but Ethan could hear Phantom moving below, the soft click of nails on hardwood as the dog made its rounds. Protecting. Always protecting. But protecting them from what? The days that followed revealed patterns that Ethan could not ignore. Phantom moved through the house with the precision of a trained K9, responding to situations with tactics that Ethan himself had taught Ranger. When the mailman approached, Phantom took position by the door, alert but not aggressive, exactly as a police dog should. When Cora played in the backyard, Phantom positioned itself between her and the fence line, monitoring the perimeter. More disturbing were the specific behaviors that had been unique to Ranger. Every morning at 6, Phantom would sit by the front door, waiting. 6 in the morning had been when Ethan and Ranger started their patrol shift. The dog refused to eat until Ethan gave a specific hand signal, thumb and 2 fingers. The command Ethan had used to tell Ranger it was safe to eat on duty. Phantom slept on the right side of any doorway, never the left, because Ranger had been trained to keep his working side clear. These were not behaviors a stray would know. These were not things that could be coincidence. Ava called on the 3rd day. "Ethan, we need to talk about Phantom. I did some checking. There's no record of any German Shepherd matching that description in any shelter within 200 miles. No missing dog reports, nothing. It's like the dog appeared out of thin air." "Dogs don't appear out of thin air, Ava." "No, they don't." Her pause carried weight. "But there's something else. I showed Phantom's photo to old Luke Henderson, the vet who used to work with the K9 unit before he retired. Ethan. He says the scar pattern matches a dog he treated 4 years ago. A police dog that died in the line of duty." Ethan's hand tightened on the phone. "That's impossible." "That's what I said. But Luke kept records, Ethan. Detailed records. Photos, measurements, scar documentation. It's all there. Either Phantom is Ranger's twin, or what?" Eva's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Or someone lied about Ranger dying that night." Ethan felt his world shifting, the solid ground of his memories becoming quicksand beneath his feet. He had been there. He had held Ranger as the dog died. He had felt the life leave that body, unless he had not. While Ethan wrestled with impossibilities, Cora and Phantom formed a bond that defied explanation. The dog that would not let shelter workers approach, that flinched from Ethan's touch, melted under Cora's small hands. She could brush the scarred fur, could press her face against the dog's neck, could whisper secrets that Phantom seemed to understand. Ethan watched them in the backyard one afternoon, Cora throwing a ball that Phantom retrieved with mechanical precision. But it was not the game that caught his attention. It was the way Phantom kept checking the fence line, the way its body tensed when a car passed on the street, the way it positioned itself to always have a clear line of sight to potential threats. This was not a pet. This was a working dog, still on duty, still protecting. "Daddy, Phantom has nightmares," Cora said that evening over dinner. She pushed her peas around her plate, her voice matter-of-fact. "It whimpers in its sleep. I think it's remembering bad things." Ethan set down his fork. "What kind of bad things?" Cora shrugged, but her eyes were old, beyond her years. "The same kind Mommy used to remember before she died, the kind that make you scared even when you're awake." Yasmin had suffered from PTSD, a result of a car accident that had left her broken, in ways that never fully healed. She had nightmares, flashbacks, moments where the past overwhelmed the present. Ethan had learned to recognize the signs, to help her through the episodes, to hold her when the memories became too much. He saw those same signs in Phantom now, the hypervigilance, the startle response, the way the dog could not fully relax, even in sleep. Phantom was not just scarred on the outside. Whatever had happened to this dog had left wounds that went bone deep. That night, Ethan made a decision. He pulled out his old case files, the documents from the warehouse raid, the incident reports he had filed and tried to forget. He spread them across his kitchen table and began to read, looking for cracks in the official story, for details that did not quite fit. The raid had targeted a drug operation run by the Cordova family, a criminal organization that had its fingers in everything from narcotics to human trafficking. The warehouse had been a distribution center, or so the intelligence had suggested. Ethan and Ranger had been first entry, backed by a tactical team. But reading the reports now, with 4 years of distance, Ethan saw inconsistencies. The response times did not match up. The medical reports were vague about Ranger's injuries. The disposal of Ranger's body had been handled by the department, not by Ethan, as he had requested. He had been told it was procedure, that K9 remains had to be processed a certain way. He had been grieving, drowning in guilt and loss, and he had not questioned it. Ethan pulled out his phone and called Tom Erickson, his old partner, the only other cop he truly trusted. "Tom, I need to ask you about the warehouse raid, the one where Ranger died." Silence stretched across the line, heavy with unspoken things. "Ethan, let it go. That case is closed. Tom, I need to know what really happened that night." "No." Tom's voice was hard, carrying a warning. "You don't. Some things are better left buried. For your own safety, brother. Let it go." The line went dead. Ethan sat in his kitchen, the files spread before him, and felt the first real stirrings of fear. Not fear of danger. He had faced that countless times. Fear of truth. Fear of discovering that everything he believed about that night was a carefully constructed lie. In the living room, Phantom raised its head, ears pricked, as if sensing Ethan's distress. The dog's eyes gleamed in the darkness, intelligent and knowing, and Ethan felt certain that Phantom held answers that could not be barked or whined. If this dog was truly Ranger, if his partner had somehow survived, then someone had gone to great lengths to make sure everyone believed otherwise. But the question that kept Ethan awake through the long night was not just how, but why. What had happened in that warehouse that was worth faking a dog's death? And what would happen when the people responsible discovered that Phantom had found its way home? The answer came on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a man Ethan had not seen in 4 years. Detective Hudson had led the warehouse raid, had been Ethan's superior, and had retired 6 months after the incident with a disability pension and a limp he had not had before. Hudson showed up at Ethan's door unannounced, his face carved with lines that spoke of sleepless nights and heavy burdens. Phantom took one look at the man and went rigid, a low growl building in its chest. Not the growl of a pet threatened by a stranger, but the focused, controlled warning of a trained attack dog identifying a threat. "We need to talk," Hudson said. His eyes flicked to Phantom, and something passed across his face. Recognition. Fear. Guilt. They sat in Ethan's living room, Phantom positioned between them, its body tense and ready. Cora was at school, the house empty except for the 3 of them, and the weight of secrets about to be unleashed. "That dog should be dead," Hudson said finally. "We all made sure of it." Ethan felt his hands curl into fists. "Explain." Hudson was silent for a long moment, his eyes distant, seeing the past. When he spoke, his voice carried the exhaustion of a man who had carried a lie for too long. The warehouse raid was a setup from the start, not by the Cordova family, by us, by the department. We had a rat in the unit, someone feeding information to the criminals, someone protecting the operations in exchange for money. The raid was designed to flush out the rat, to see who would warn the suspects. But it went wrong. Everything went wrong. Ethan's chest tightened. Ranger found the drugs like he was trained to do, but he found something else too. Documents, financial records. Evidence that the rat wasn't just some low-level cop taking bribes. It went high, Ethan, all the way to the chief, and Ranger led us right to it. The room seemed to shrink around Ethan. So you killed him to bury the evidence? We tried. Hudson's laugh was bitter. We shot him, left him for dead in that warehouse. But somehow, the dog survived. Crawled out during the fire we set to destroy the evidence. We thought he had died somewhere in the woods. When we couldn't find a body, we faked one. Had a dead shepherd from another case, similar enough. We gave it Ranger's tags and buried it with full honors. Ethan felt sick. Why tell me this now? Hudson leaned forward, his voice urgent. Because the dog came back, because people are noticing, because the chief is still in power, still corrupt, and he has too much to lose if anyone starts asking questions. When I saw your daughter's Facebook post about the new dog, when I saw the photos, he shook his head. Ethan, they're going to kill that dog, for real this time, and anyone who tries to protect it. Phantom moved then, placing itself between Ethan and Hudson, its body a shield. The movement was pure instinct, pure training, pure loyalty to a partner it had never stopped protecting. Ethan understood then. Ranger, because it was Ranger, he knew that now with certainty, had not just survived. The dog had waited, had lived in the wild, hiding from those who wanted it dead, surviving on instinct and training and a will to live that could not be broken. And somehow, through whatever miracle of loyalty or fate, Ranger had found its way home. Not to the department that had tried to kill it, not to the handlers who had erased it. Home to Ethan, home to the partner who had loved it. They're coming, aren't they? Ethan asked quietly. Hudson nodded. I came to warn you. Take the dog and run. Leave town. Change your names. Because if you stay, if you fight this, they'll bury you both so deep no one will ever find you. No. Ethan's voice was steady, carrying the weight of a decision made. I ran once when I should have fought. I accepted their lies because I was drowning in grief. Not again. Not this time. Hudson stood, his face resigned. Then God help you, Ethan, because I can't. After Hudson left, Ethan sat with Ranger, his hand resting on the dog's scarred head. Cora would be home from school in an hour. He needed to make arrangements. Needed to ensure her safety before the storm came. Because it was coming, he could feel it in his bones, could see it in the way Ranger's body stayed tense and alert. The dog that had died to protect the truth was back. And this time, Ethan would not let its sacrifice be in vain. However, Ethan did not realize that the truth Ranger carried was even darker than Hudson had revealed, and the final betrayal would come from the person he least expected. The call came at midnight. Cora's school principal, Mrs. Decker, her voice shaking with urgency. Officer Brown, you need to come to the school immediately. Cora is here. She's safe, but there's been an incident. Ethan's blood turned to ice. Cora's at home. She's asleep. No, sir. She's been here for the past hour. She said she needed to show me something. Something about Phantom and a secret her mother told her before she died. The world tilted. Ethan ran to Cora's room and found her bed empty, the window open to the cool night air. Ranger was already at the door, body coiled tight, ready to move. The school was dark except for the lights in the principal's office. Ethan took the stairs 2 at a time, Ranger at his heels, his heart hammering against his ribs. Cora sat in a chair, too calm, too still, her eyes carrying that ancient weight he had learned to fear. "Tell him," Cora said to Mrs. Decker. "Tell him what Mommy knew." Mrs. Decker's hands trembled as she pulled out a folder, old and worn. "Your wife came to me a week before she died. She was a teacher here, Ethan. We were friends. She gave me this, made me promise to keep it safe. To only give it to you if something happened to her, or if the dog ever came back. I didn't understand then. I'm not sure I understand now." Ethan took the folder. Inside were documents, photos, financial records. Yasmin's handwriting covered the margins, notes, connections, a web of corruption that went deeper than Hudson had admitted. "Mom was investigating," Cora said softly. "She figured out that Chief Dillon was dirty. She found proof. But she didn't know who else was involved, who else she could trust. So she documented everything and hid it. She told me where to find it the night before she died." Ethan's hands shook. "The car accident wasn't an accident." Cora's voice was steady, but tears tracked down her cheeks. "Phantom knows. Phantom was there. Mom took Phantom out the night she died because she was scared. She had the evidence with her, was going to mail it somewhere safe. But they found her, ran her off the road. Phantom tried to protect her, fought them, got hurt bad. They thought both Phantom and Mom died in the crash, but Phantom survived, ran away and hid." The room spun around Ethan. Yasmin's death had been ruled an accident, faulty brakes, wet roads, a terrible tragedy. He had never questioned it because the grief had been too much, the loss too consuming. He had been blind. "The evidence Mom found connects Chief Dillon to the Cordova family," Cora continued, her voice stronger now. "But there's more. Other cops, a judge, a prosecutor. They've been protecting the drug operations for years, getting paid to look the other way. Ranger found the original documents in the warehouse. Mom found copies they'd missed. Together, it's enough to bring them all down." Ethan looked at Ranger, really looked at the scars, the missing ear, the wounds that had never been explained. These were not just the marks of bullets from the warehouse. These were defensive wounds, bite marks, the signs of a desperate fight against multiple attackers. "You fought for her," Ethan whispered to the dog. "You tried to save her." Ranger's tail moved once, a small acknowledgement. Mrs. Decker spoke up, her voice quiet. Yasmin said, if anything happened to her, the dog would come back. She said Ranger was smart enough to survive, loyal enough to wait, and brave enough to return when the time was right. She said to watch for a girl and a dog finding each other, because that would be the sign that it was time to fight. Ethan pulled Cora into his arms, feeling her small body shake against him. His wife had died protecting the truth. His partner had survived years in the wilderness, carrying the weight of that night, waiting for the chance to finish the mission. And his daughter had carried this terrible knowledge alone, waiting for the pieces to fall into place. "What do we do now, Daddy?" Cora asked against his chest. Ethan looked at the documents, at the evidence that could bring down a network of corruption that had poisoned his department, his town, his life. He thought of Yasmin's last moments, of her fear and her courage. He thought of Ranger's long journey home, of the scars earned protecting a woman who had tried to do the right thing. "Now we fight," Ethan said. "We take this evidence to the FBI. We burn it all down. And we make sure that Mom and Ranger's sacrifice means something." But even as he spoke, he heard the sound of cars pulling up outside the school. Multiple vehicles, doors opening, footsteps on pavement. Ranger's growl filled the room, low and dangerous. They had run out of time. The standoff lasted through the night. Chief Dillon and his corrupt officers surrounded the school, but Ethan had called Tom Erickson, his old partner, the one he truly trusted. Tom had come, bringing federal agents who had been building their own case, waiting for the evidence they needed. When dawn broke over Pine Ridge, Chief Dillon and 6 other officers were in custody. The evidence Yasmin had died protecting, combined with Ranger's impossible survival and Hudson's testimony, was enough to unravel the entire network. Ethan sat on the school steps as the sun rose, Cora on one side, Ranger on the other. The dog leaned against him, finally relaxed, the weight of its mission finally lifted. "Can we keep him, Daddy?" Cora asked, though she was smiling because she already knew the answer. "We could never let him go," Ethan said, his hand resting on Ranger's scarred head. "He's family. He's always been family." The local news later reported it as the biggest corruption bust in the state's history. But for Ethan, the story was simpler and more profound. It was about loyalty that transcended death, about love that survived betrayal, about a dog that had done the impossible because its partner needed it. Phantom disappeared from the official records. In its place, the department reinstated K9 Ranger to active duty, with full honors and back pay. But Ranger never worked another case. The dog had earned its rest, had paid its dues 1,000 times over. On quiet evenings, Ethan would sit with Cora and Ranger in their backyard, watching the sunset paint the sky. Cora would lean against the dog's side, her fingers gentle on scarred fur, and tell Ranger about her day. The dog would listen with patient eyes, content in a way it had never been during the long years of hiding. Some nights, Ethan could swear he felt Yasmin's presence, could almost hear her voice on the wind, thanking him for finishing what she started, for protecting their daughter, for bringing their dog home. The child's question had been simple. "Can I buy that dog, Daddy?" But the answer had unraveled a conspiracy, exposed corruption, delivered justice, and reunited a family torn apart by violence and lies. Sometimes the most important questions are the ones asked by the smallest voices. And sometimes the most loyal hearts are the ones that refuse to give up, even when the whole world believes they should be dead. Ranger lived 8 more years, watching Cora grow, protecting Ethan, finally at peace. When the old dog finally closed its eyes for the last time, it was surrounded by the family it had fought so hard to save, in a home filled with love instead of secrets. And if sometimes, on quiet evenings, a child's voice could be heard in the backyard talking to a ghost, well, some bonds transcend even death itself.